Today we are looking at Goddess of the River, the new patch for SMITE that includes our new Goddess Yemoja. And now my camera is actually set up properly as well, so that's nice. And in this one we're going to first look at Yemoja and then, as usual, go through the rest of the chain, especially at the focus on the balance changes. Yemoja's first ability, or rather her passive, is Omi. And Omi is basically replacing her mana. Instead, she has these bars of Omi, and her abilities use a certain amount of Omi. This can kind of scale up a little bit throughout the game. She starts with 7, is able to end up to 3 more. She also gains 1 Omi per 5 seconds, and this increases by 0.01 per level. Cooldown reduction can also increase its regeneration, meaning it effectively still reduces your ability's cooldowns. Her basic attacks can pass through enemies, through allies, not through enemies, and heal allies with a heal over time. It's actually not properly described here, I think. So it applies a heal over time that lasts for 7 seconds, and that you can refresh by hitting an enemy again, but you can't stack it or something like that. An ally, sorry, an ally, not an enemy. And the Omi can also unlock these additional slots for Omi, and that's done by increasing your mana or your MP5. And if you reach 300, 450 or 600 mana or MP5 from items, then you will get this, which makes me think it's probably easier to achieve it through mana than MP5. MP5 is more a bit of a bonus if it's converted 1-to-1. Then for basic attacks, okay, it's described here separately. They hit in a larger radius for allies, so you don't have to hit them as precisely, whereas the normal basic attack that hits enemies with damage is equally large to any other basic attack. And you can see here the basic healing is 1 every 0.5 seconds, and that increases by 0.2 per level, and it says 10% increased healing as well, so it increases following healing as far as I understand it. And then her first ability is 2 abilities. Her first ability on one hand is Bouncing Bubble, and on the other hand is Moonstrike. Bouncing Bubble is very hard to describe. It's a huge bubble that drops down and then bounces once, and then a smaller bubble is then, while it bounces, it becomes a smaller bubble, and then that bubble pops into, I think, 6 very small bubbles, like at least in a circle around that, and these hit enemies as well. So they slow initially, 30% slow, and the smaller bubbles also deal less damage than the first bubbles, 50% reduction. And if you hit by both bubbles, you have a 50% damage reduction on the second bubble hit. And this ability, it looks very crazy. It looks very, I would say, somewhat all over the place. It does 40 to 200 damage, 40% magical power scaling, slow lasts for 1.2 to 2 seconds, and it costs 2 Omi. It's very interesting in that regard as well, because wait, no, that's on the second part. That's on the Moonstrike, not on the Bouncing Bubble. This ability is confusing. So you use this ability like this, and then you get another ability, which is Moonstrike, and they kind of swap places. So it's like a mini stand swap just between those 2 abilities. And there's a reason for that, because the second ability can stun, and Hyris didn't want you to be able to stun lock enemies because she can use abilities multiple times due to her Omi. So Yemoja calls upon the moon to deal damage to enemies below. The inner strike is the largest, dealing full damage and stunning all enemies and enemy structures hit. So yes, this stuns structures briefly, interrupting towers from shooting. The inner damage here is 50 to 210, plus 55% scaling, and the outer damage is much smaller, 20 to 100, with 20% scaling, so really more of a poke. You want to hit the middle stun here. The stun lasts 1 to 1.4 seconds, the cost is 2 Omi. Now, the ability starts from the outside, so you have circles, can I get that on the camera? Like this. You have circles on the outside, then circles again, and then the middle circle that's relatively big that will stun the enemy. And you have to make sure that the middle thing hits, which is kind of hard because it starts on the outside and the enemy has the possibility to walk away. So it helps to set that up with your Bouncing Bubble for the slow. And what's also important about this ability, which I thought was on the other for a second, is the size of the ability depends on how far away you are from enemies. So if you run up close to an enemy, you have a much bigger chance of hitting the stun because the AoE itself is much bigger than when they're far away, where it's more like a gamble or you try to catch them running away or something. I think this is completely unique. It's mine. We hadn't had anything like this yet, and it's very interesting. And Haru said it's partially to encourage her still going close to enemies, going into the fray a little bit, and I really like this design. Then we have Mending Waters. Yemoja sends out a wave of water that damages enemies it passes through. Very simple. This damage is increased against anyone who has a shield, and that's extra unmitigated damage as well. So, as far as I understand, it's extra true damage. The damage here is 170 to plus 40%. The bonus damage to shields initially is 2 times that damage, and at the last stage is actually 3 times that damage. So this is gonna hurt if you have shields. And then once the wave reaches an ally, it bounces to all nearby allies, healing and shielding them for 3 seconds. And that includes yourself as well. So you get a 20 to 100 heal plus 20% of your magical power, and 40 to 200 shield plus 20% of your magical power. It costs 3 Omi, but you can also use that multiple times, especially if someone's low, to stack a quick shield on them and a quick heal. Riptide is her third ability, which you can kind of somewhat imagine similar to a Janos portal, but not on a wall. So she creates a ring in the air that you can like put in front of her, and that ring will knock enemies and allies forward or backward. For allies, it's a longer knockback. For enemies, it's a little bit shorter, depending on how you place it. If you place it far away, it knocks towards you. If you place it closer, it knocks away. And this can obviously be used to bring enemies towards you or push enemies away from you, but also to bring allies towards you when they're in trouble. You have to keep in mind that enemies can be affected by it as well, but again, to a different extent for a different range, so it's still useful for allies to use it. And they also get movement speed and protections when passing through this. It's 20 to 40% movement speed, so quite a lot, and 20 to 40 physical and magical protections. And enemies that go through it are also slowed, so the distance is created here in that regard as well, by 30% for 2 seconds. The ring itself lasts for 6 seconds and costs 3 Omi. Again, a lot of CC here already. We have a knockback and a slow in this one. We have a slow and a stun in the first ability, and the second ability only has a specific counter mechanic on CC, but then we also have the ultimate, which also has CC. Reverse Rebuke. Yemoja unleashes her full power, creating 2 large walls of water that block enemy movement projectiles, so you can't walk through them, but allies can. After a delay, the river cascades down, damaging, trembling, and slowing enemies. Yemoja gains a buff to her Omi regeneration while she's in the river field that lingers briefly after she leaves it. So, you have 240 damage to 500 damage and 70% magical power. Actually, surprisingly high scaling. Looking at the scalings overall, we have like 40% here, 55% here, 40% here. So nothing too crazy, but the ult with 70 actually has like a solid oomph to it. A 90% slow when you're being hit, but that decreases by 30% each second. So it lasts for 3 seconds overall. Go for 90, 60, 30, and it's gone. Slow duration 3 seconds, that's it as well. The Omi generation is 1 extra Omi every 2 seconds while in the river field, but it doesn't last that long. It's like a total of, I think the crash of the river happens after like 2-3 seconds-ish, and then you have the buff duration for an extra 4 seconds. So it's not forever, but of course you can spam your kit a lot more in that time. And it has a cooldown of 100 seconds. Yeah, I think it's very interesting. Like you have the trembling and the slowing as well, so enemies can jump away, but otherwise they're pretty disrupted while in this area. A lot going on, very crazy kid. I'm very much looking forward to seeing how she will feel. I think she's very much encouraging people to play support and feel differently while doing so. So that's going to be very, very fun. And then we get to the rest of the patch. We have, we're going to just briefly look at them if you want to see them in detail. We have the patch notes show for that. We have a farmer skin for Persephone. We have a tech skin for Xingtian. Not that great, but the farmer skin is really cool. Some anti-hero skin for Thor. Not really a fan. A really cool skin for Neith. It is a Neith skin, but it's a complete redesign of Neith. Swift Scuria, which I kind of wish some other guys would have gotten, but she's just too popular. It's too profitable for them. And yeah, it's just like a mouse with magical arrows and everything. Really cool. We have Wise Wizard Merlin, so an old version of Merlin here. We have Horrific Harvester, Aposh, a Scarecrow with very cool, unique fire effects. We have Bloody Butcher Ymir with very bloody effects and very cool effects like spikes and like a torture chamber door and whatnot. Really cool. Radical Rex Shark, another one of those. I'm forgetting the word now. Vaporwave skins, like maybe also more of a retro skin at the same time. Strange but kind of cool. And Yemoja's gold skins also very, very cool looking. Release schedule here, we have Yemoja right away, and then we have the Persephone and Merlin skin and the Halloween chest with the skins in that. And later in the Odyssey, we also have Whirlwind Tech, Xingtian, Swift Scurrier, Neath, and then the Retro Rex chest is coming out. Actually, I have to check here if Swift Scurrier. Yeah, Swift Scurrier is also in the Odyssey. That's actually pretty cool. So all of these skins here are Odyssey. These two here are Halloween. And then the Retro Rex chest is just that one, specifically another chest. Halloween chest is a bit unfortunate because it's so full at this point. And then Dawn Defender Thor comes last. All right, Esports Profile. So there's going to be a bunch of esports items. I'm not going to go through all of them individually that are coming back that can be bought until Season 7. Certain medals and like other awards with like trophies and stuff on them for a lot of competitive teams. You can see all of them in detail here that can be bought for a while now. I'm actually not sure how certain things like the HUD theme are going to be available, but I'll just direct purchase then, I'm assuming. And then we have bug fixes. Only Fury sometimes didn't work properly. That's fixed. The spawn coming for her. Archer minions glitching out at Titan, fixed. UI fixes of all sorts that we don't need to go through in detail here. But it's nice that that's happening. Some console fixes. Various guard fixes, mainly stuff for skins here for Chang'e, for Chernobog, for Hell. We're just gonna skip over this because it's really nothing too big as far as I know. Some glitches for Horus that are fixed as well. And this one is interesting. Goddess of Demonetization, Circle of Protection, fixing a fixed ability to proc stuff Merlin when going on cooldown rather than being cast. That's actually important. I don't know how that happened because I work normal initially. And King Arthur not getting Pridwen to trigger. Equally important on his ultimate. And then some fixes for Persephone as well. Well, it's not actually listed under the fixes here. The damage was actually wrong, but it's actually not listed as a fix for the plants when she was dead. We'll get to that. And that brings us to Project Olympus, because Project Olympus is actually very interesting this time. Early surrender is no longer punished. Early surrender used to be you still lose half of your TP or something, and I was always like, why? What's the reason? Why are you still being punished when clearly that's supposed to leave? And the reason, also we were told, was always there is toxicity. If this and that happens, like people are gonna try and bully others out in the lobby so that they get an early surrender so they don't lose points. Harris has changed their stance on that, and now we can finally rejoice and do early surrenders so people don't load into the game without losing any MMR, any TP. And the winning team still gets reduced points, and the person who, but they still get points, that's the point. And the person who caused the early surrender will lose double the amount of TP, but the MMR will be unaffected. Very, very nice. Gonna solve a lot of frustration in lower level ranked, where really often the outcome of your game and your climb depends more on how many players are in, well, not necessarily always at the start of the game, but in the game in general. So very cool. Maybe that will be expanded to levers eventually. Then we have, in some way, not 100%. Then we have data-driven auto-buy. I'm not going to read this all out, but it's a really cool feature overall. So basically, what they're going to do is they're going to take the data from high-level conquest games and which items are built there with the highest win rate and make that the auto-buy items. And they will be adjusted, so if the enemy team has a lot of magicals, then there will be magical defense items in that or similar. So it's not like it's just one build that you're always going to get, but it's completely adjusted depending on the situation. There may be some glitches early on. Harris already stated that, so bit of patience with that. But should definitely be better than the popular tag that we have at the moment, or the popular tab. And what's really nice about this is that it will actually mean that access to popular items for your character that you build often is also going to be easier, because you don't need to search for items that frequently anymore. They are just there. They're more accessible. And they're also sorted differently now with, was it core part 1, core part 2, and situational or something. So that's going to be more accessible as well. Very good change in my opinion, especially for newer players. Especially because we have a lot of players that are not that interested in looking deep into builds. This is going to up things a fair bit. On the other hand, of course, it takes a little bit of leverage for those who focus on builds heavily, because now people don't need to learn as much about that anymore. It's going to be interesting how often we also see items like brawlers being automatically built through this. So honestly, imagine in the long run, especially with the statistics available to this, these builds might end up being better than a lot of players' normal builds. So yeah, looking forward to that. And yes, then we have some detailed changes here, but it's all just about auto buy and everything. Yeah, cool. Player behavior updates. There is a updated bad word filter list to better catch players that try to bypass it. So if you're one of those that try to put numbers in it or something, good luck with that. Because the next step is shadow banning. Players who engage in certain negative chat behaviors will have their ability to send chat message removed, but they will not get any feedback to indicate the messages have not been sent. So if you're particularly toxic, then it's basically as if the whole team's ignoring you because you're shadow banned and you won't even know. I think it's fine. I think if someone is toxic enough to get that shadow ban mechanism triggered, then, you know, if they want to spam angry stuff, they can. It's just not going to bother anyone anymore. Cool. Might, though, on the other hand, actually make it somewhat harder to ban people in the long run, because you can't see as much toxicity from them, but we'll find out about that. And then there is the chat gag. So, a new penalty that can be applied to players' account, limiting the amount of messages they have available to send. When triggered, players will have a limited number of messages, VGS commands, and pings they can send. As the match continues, they will slowly gain more messages. As players who are chat gagged play games where they don't engage in negative chat behavior, these restrictions will become less intense and eventually removed. Very good step. I know other games have taken the step. Like, the more toxic you are, the less you get to talk, the less you get to ping. Because then you have to consciously use your resources that you have to make important calls instead of writing toxic stuff in chat. And if you keep writing toxic stuff in chat, you're probably eventually going to get banned if that's all you do. So another thing that you just encourages better behavior by punishing a negative behavior, and I think it's completely fine. As long as it's handled halfway decently, I'm super happy about all of this. And automated instance reporting. This one I'm a bit more skeptical about. So, based on actions players engage in the game, the match instance itself can report players. Adjusted back and behavior system to utilize this automatic instance reporting more directly. So the focus will still be on player reporting, and if there are no player reports coming in from other players, they're probably not going to get banned. But this automatic system can kind of support cases where there are multiple reports, and then there is some more evidence, okay, this person has also been bad in other games where they haven't been reported. I think it's a good way, but at the same time, the system is, of course, not perfect. We know that, or I have seen it multiple times, that people have just been doing poorly in a game, but just because they didn't know what they were doing, and they ended up having that automatic exclamation mark for intentional feeding. So it could be a bit of a problem in that regard, but we'll see. We'll see how it turns out, and as long as the bans are still primarily relying on player reports, that should be fine. And we have ping text notification. When a player pings the minimap, a chat message will be generated indicates which player pinged the map, but only once every 5 seconds, so you can't spam around with it. I don't know if I like that one that much. That might actually be more annoying than anything, but it's okay, I guess. So, a lot of stuff in that regard that's very, very cool. And interestingly enough, this was not even mentioned in the patch notes, I think. Classic Joust returns. As the old adventures continue, we'll have Classic Joust again for a month, which I think is cool, because I like that, even though it's kind of a wonky game mode. because it's not very balanced. But I like it. That's back again. So cool. Yeah, I like it. Not much more to say about that. Nice. Play some Joust. Classic. Qs added hard difficulty to co-op and practice. That's going to be interesting. Let's see how violent hard Anubis and Chiron can get. Easy and medium difficulties have been rebalanced. Maybe it's just that the other ones have gotten easier. I don't know. We'll see. Practice queues have been moved to the training tab. Item balance. As a note for all balance changes in this update, this is the update that the World Championship at DreamHack will be played on. So not that many changes, and the pros use this to prepare. And considering that, there are a few actually somewhat surprising changes, but we will see. So, first one, Assassin's Blessing. There's been a lot of discussion about the impact of jungles and conquest, especially in the early game. Oh really, it's been like that since the start of the season, guys. It's almost over. It's almost over. And I've been told for so long that there need to be no changes, and now they're coming. Alright, let's see what it is. With Worlds quickly approaching, we don't want to implement any extreme map changes to force a meta shift, so instead we're giving jungles a slight buff to their starter item to help them better compare to other roles at the start of the match. Now provides plus 50 health. Wow, that's big. For I don't know what, but you die a little less in early game. Alright, okay. Now 50 health is not bad, but I don't think it's gonna deter people from like invading or something, so it's like Band-Aid something, not really a fix. More like, have a Band-Aid for no reason. It's not really what I would have wanted to see. Like I would have wanted to see some very different direction, but that's it. I don't even see the point of an Assassin's Blessing having health, but on the other hand, we also get increased mana restored from 20 to 25 per trigger of its passive, so on camps. That's nice. A little bit more mana sustain for jungles is always nice. That's the part I can get behind more. And then we have Blackthorn Hammer. Everything stays the same, but the cost increase from 2,000 to 2,200. Absolutely fair. If you think that Blackthorn's Hammer price is fair compared to every other item looking at the stats, then you're delusional. So yeah, this nerf. Long overdue. I'm very fan. Heartseeker. This item made a lot of noise when it was reworked last update. We've seen a lot of differing opinions on the item, and after a few fixes, it seems to be having the intended impact. It allows assassins to have a bigger impact in the later stages of the game. This item is seeing a slight nerf to its cost to make sure it's clearly positioned as a late game item. Right, I went through the stats for Heartseeker, for Hunters, for Assassins. I already did Assassins, but I did the whole video for Hunters already. It's not out yet, but it's coming soon. And I gotta say, I don't know about this one. I can see that Heartseeker has its late game applications and it's supposed to be a late game item. But first of all, it's not necessarily gonna get better on Assassins through this change by much, because the change is from price increase from 2,900 to 3,100, but a fix where the item was providing 70 physical power instead of the listed 75 physical power. So you're paying 200 gold for extra power, for 5 extra power. Does that sound like something you want to do in late game? Like, not for me. I don't really see the purpose here. So I looked into it for Assassins already, and it was kind of, it's okay. It's a late game item, it has its place. But it's kind of really when you have nothing else left. And on Hunters, actually, it's different, but also kind of in a similar direction. And that makes me wonder, like, okay, this item is probably already kind of lost in its purpose, because it was supposed to be for Assassins in late game. And right now I have a feeling it might do more on Hunters, and it might also do more on Warriors. I still have to look into that one. And now it's becoming super expensive, which means Assassins will have even less interest in investing into it until very, very, very late. And it's more expensive than like any crit item, anything. I think it's the most expensive item in the game right now, if I recall correctly. I don't know. Why can't Assassins have something nice sometimes, you know? It just came out. It wasn't... That's just weird. It's just weird. I don't know how I feel about that. And speaking of weird, Achilles is getting his basic attack range back, and his animation is now adjusted so that his basic attack range looks longer. So people felt like Achilles was just nerfed into the ground and destroyed when they took away the basic attack range. I don't agree with that. I still don't agree with that, but apparently that was an issue that a lot of people had. I know that in my comment section, a lot of people were unhappy with this. Fair enough. It's back. I think a lot of people said they thought it was necessary for his mechanics, but his mechanics also already bring him to enemies and also lock enemies down for him, so I don't really see it. But it's okay. I don't have an issue with it either. And we have a push. Undead Surge now applies a 40% reduction in healing for 5 seconds. And that's outside of the other anti-healing mechanics that he has in his kit already. Which, yeah, it's a bit odd to me actually. Like, of course, he is the most insane anti-heal god by far now, but I don't even think he needed this for it. If you'd stack this with Divine Rune, you'd slap these 3 and you ult on them, basically doing negative healing if they heal, because they take damage after. Weird, but I guess. Kukulkan gets adjustments because he's just not doing... Well, he's just not doing enough in competitive. And I can see why these changes are being made, but at the same time, it's a lot at once. So all the base stats increase. That's what I kind of would have thought makes sense here. Base health increased by 15 here. Health per level increased from 68 to 75, so an extra 7. And movement speed from 355 to 360. All very, very logical to make him a bit more survivable due to his lack of the amount of escapes that others have. But then Whirlwind has an increased rate at which Whirlwind is applied or attempts to apply or refreshed. This is now 0.25 seconds instead of 0.5 seconds. And that means instead of waiting 2 seconds to get hit initially, it's now 1.75 seconds. So you get out of the whirlwind faster at the start, otherwise you get hit. And it refreshes quicker if you step in at any point later. And it also deals an additional tick of damage that immediately procs when it's applied to an enemy. So it actually has more damage as well that has a higher chance of happening. And that seems like a lot of things going on for Whirlwind here at the same time, which yeah, like I said, surprised me to some extent, but that's what it is. Persephone gets various adjustments because she's just in a weird place at the moment still. Here it says Persephone has a relatively low win rate in all normal modes, but she's hotly contested in the Pro League. She's seeing some adjustments here to make her performance more consistent. She'll now be limited to a much smaller number of plants in the early game, and Bone Rush will now have a slower and more clear telegraphed hit area. The funny thing is that initially, everyone, like literally all the pros that talked about her, I know that Wolfie and Weekend were talking about it and stuff, everyone says that she had no place in competitive. It's kind of funny to me that now it's like, she's hotly contested there, but you know, it's what happens. It's how things change when gods show up in one way or another. So she gets a whole set of changes in various ways. Persephone's harvest plants now deal 50% damage when in her revived state. So that I think is more of a fix really, because you know I don't think they should have dealt more when her damage was generally reduced. Persephone now gains 100% of her mana back when entering her death state. This is a surprising one. I didn't know like her death state needs more buffs, but I guess it's kind of offsetting the harvest plant nerf. And a brief lock also, players cannot accidentally cancel the reviving themselves. That's also fair. Then Bone Rush. The damage area of the Bone Rush is now a line attack. So instead of having this second part being instant, it just rolls over from the front, from the front to the back. And I think that's interesting because the downside of the ability that it was already delayed and couldn't be like readjusted while firing. So I thought that second part was very much intended, but apparently it was still too much. And also added a sound to give players a better feedback that this ability has been cast, so even easier to avoid that way. And the damage area of Bone Rush is now displayed with a warning targeter, so even more help for the players against this ability, which makes this very hard to hit, I think. So interesting, strange to me. And then we have Harvest. Harvest max count has been decreased from 10 at all levels to 6, 6, 8, 8, 10. I think that's fair. It was way too much at the start. Harvest now displays a buff bar counter to indicate how many harvest plants are active. Nice. And a new minimap icon for Persephone's harvest plants. Absolutely necessary. Increased harvest explosion scaling from 75% to 80%. Increased harvest bite scaling from 85% to 90%. So 5% each. And decreased subsequent damage reduction from 50, 75, 87.5 to 40, 65 to 78, meaning that spamming more plants is now more rewarding than before, which I think is very, very interesting. 3 plants seem like a lot more viable attack compared to before, and that could hurt. So overall, I think she's gotten a fair few nerfs in this, and she still has the same weak points that she had before, but this damage increase, it's looking very interesting and very spicy, and I want to see what she does now. The shift is definitely from her Bone Rush to her Harvest here, but we'll see how it works out for her. I think she still struggles in some regards, but and some other very strong points from before are now a bit weaker, but we'll see how it goes for her because she's still got some buffs in return. Raijin, Raiju rather. Increase Raiju's base bounce damage per tick from 9 to 33 to 14 to 50. Actually, okay, it is actually more than I remembered. Like when I briefly saw it on the patch notes, I wasn't fully paying attention, and I'm like, oh, this is actually a fair bit. And increased Rage's bounce damage tick scaling from 8% to 10%. So a little bit there as well. Could be cool. Could be interesting how he's doing with that. Set. Our solo assassin. He gets nerfs to Kingslayer specifically that encourage you to build more like an assassin and less tanky. Decreased base damage of Kingslayer from 25 to 85 to 25 to 65. Increased base damage scaling from 25 to 30%. Decreased base healing from 45 to 105 to 45 to 85. Increased heal scaling from 20% to 25%. After the description, to make it more clear that only sets attacks mark enemies, meaning no items marking enemies. So I think these changes are fair. I think it's still not going to push Set out of his, out of his current role. I think that's going to remain the same. There are exception ways being played in jungle, but I think overall solo is his place at the moment, and ADC to some extent. So back. This one makes me happy. Charge Prey, decreased cooldown from 15 to 13 seconds, and Sickening Strike, increased damage from 60 to 220 to 80 to 220. A little bit more early clear with the Sickening Strike, which especially helps on support as well. And Charge Prey being up a little bit more often, a little bit more punishing for the enemies. I really like that. I don't like the next one. I did it before, I have to do it again, because now my camera is actually mirrored properly. Tyr buff was needed. Tyr is getting a massive buff, which is Fearless God Sense no longer disarms enemies, but instead now knocks up enemies. So he has a knock up and a knockback and another knockback. That's what you used to have once upon a time, and I hated it. And I don't see how with the current items and in the current meta this can still be anywhere near balanced, but we will see. I'm going to play some Tyr in jungle, because I think he's going to be busted as a jungler, because like the setup potential that he has now is through the roof. And that's right before Worlds as well. I feel like we're going to see some Tyr at Worlds. And that's what unleashed Shivalanke Poison Darts increased the poison slow from 4 to 20% to 20% at all ranks. Kind of offsetting the nerf that he got to his ultimate. He wasn't doing all too hot anymore. And I think that's an okay change. It could actually be quite nasty in some situations. So we'll see about that. And that is it for these patch notes. With that, thank you guys very much for watching. And if you're new to the channel, feel free to hit the sub button, maybe the bell, we have some out. We're going to look at the new goddess on the PTS as soon as it comes up. I think it's coming up soon-ish. Maybe this comes out after that anyway, so we'll see. And until then, see you for the next one later. DukeSloth, out.